Video is to demonstrate the calculation of a correlation coefficient using SPSS, and also using SPSS to create a scatterplot graph to be used as a figure to illustrate the relationship between the two variables involved in the correlation. Remember, for a correlation coefficient, you'll be relating two continuous variables, such as, for example, neuroticism, total scores on neuroticism. This variable here ranges from 0 for the lowest score to 40, the highest score. Let's say we want to relate that to T35, which is the question on the tattoo survey that goes, if you had to do it over again, would you still get your tattoo? Both of these are continuous variables because they're quantitative. They're in order, and they have more than two categories. Calculating the correlation coefficient is actually very simple. You just go to the Analyze menu, go to Correlate, and choose Bivariate, which just means two variables. When you do that, it opens up a window where you have to select the variables you want to correlate. And I've already said we're going to correlate total scores on neuroticism. Move it right in there. And T35, if you had to do it over again, would you still get your tattoo? With 7 being definitely yes and a 1 being definitely no. Once we've got it in here, we're good to go. There's really no options you need to choose, although one thing you can do is you can choose means and standard deviations, and that'll give you descriptive statistics on your two variables that you can then use in a table. So if you like, go ahead and click that and continue, and then OK. And your SPSS output will give you the results of that correlation. You can see where the n-tot row meets the T35 row. And there's our correlation coefficient, -0.100. That is the R value. As you know, correlation coefficients range from -1 to +1. And so this is a negative correlation. The next line, sig, two-tailed, means significance, statistical significance. It's the p-value. And you can see that the p-value for this particular correlation is 0.338. As you know, statistical significance is not achieved unless the p-value is less than 0.05. So 0.338 would not be significant. You also find out that you're using 94 cases. It's that N row there is sample size. And this entry here tells us that we used 94 cases to compute this correlation coefficient. It's 94 instead of the full sample of 220 because there are only 94 people who had tattoos and responded to that question. If you had to do it over again, would you still get a tattoo? So you're going to need this information to report in your results section. You're going to need your correlation coefficient, the R, 0.338, the p-value, and you're going to need the n to calculate your degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom for the correlation coefficient is n minus 2. So in this case, the degrees of freedom would be 92. Okay, so that's the information you're going to need for your results section for discussing the correlation between two continuous variables. To display this information graphically, the best way to do it is to go to Graphs and choose Chart Builder. Click OK. You're going to choose the scatter dot graphs, and as the first box here is the simple scatter. Mouse over, it says simple scatter. You drag that up into the schematic window, and you label your y and x axis. Your x axis is whatever you're using to predict scores on the y axis. So in my hypothesis here, I'm kind of using neuroticism scores to predict whether somebody's happy with their tattoo. Because I'm predicting using the neuroticism scores, I make that my x-axis. T35 is my variable for how, if you were happy with your, if you had to do it over again, would you still get a tattoo? I put that on the y-axis. And this is my schematic for the scatter plot. When I click OK, I'll get it in my SPSS output window. It's still running. Here it comes. There it is. There's my scatter plot. You see I've got neuroticism values from 0 to 40. I've got T35 values from 3 to 7. You know that variable actually goes from 1 to 7, but nobody in my sample said 1 or 2 in response to that question, so it only shows this range. And every one of these dots indicates somebody's response pairing between neuroticism and T35. Now, to use this in your APA style paper, you double click on the graph and it puts you into editing mode here. I'm going to move this over so you can see it. We don't need that for now. Everything in this graph is editable by clicking on it in some way. You know, for example, APA formatting doesn't allow you to have a title across the top like this. You've got to put your figure caption in underneath the figure, and you can do that in Word. So we're going to remove this by double-clicking on it, well, or maybe single-clicking on it. Everything here is a matter, it's editable, but you need to figure out how to do it. I just clicked it once, and it allowed me to start editing. Just get rid of that. In tote, I know what that means, but most readers won't know what that means, so I want to make that into something that actually describes the variable, and so I can modify that to neuroticism. T35 is not very descriptive either, so I'm going to give it a real variable name, which is, if you had to do it over again when you get tattoos, that's too much to write. I'd say, I don't know. I'd have to think about this. Intention to get tattoo again. You can come up with something better than that probably, and it goes right there. I also don't like the fact that I've only got 3 to 7 as the range for my variable. So if I click on this left axis here, there's some things I can do. By going to scale, I can make the minimum value 1 and apply that, and all possible values can show up on the graph. I guess I'm happy with that. 1 to 7, 0 to 40, I've got everything represented there. Look, you can do all sorts of things here. You can change the increment. One thing I don't like that I see here is I've got this grid. Most scatter plots don't have that grid, so I would look around to see if I can find a way to get rid of that grid. I'm sure it's just finding the right button. Actually, let's see if I can figure it out. Yeah, I clicked on that grid. I wonder if I can just delete it. Delete. Oh, yeah, I deleted. No, I didn't. Let's try it again. Delete. Didn't do it. Hide grid lines. There it is. Hide grid lines. There they go. Let's do the horizontal ones too. Hide grid lines. Okay, there we are. There's our scatter plot. It represents the graphic relationship between neuroticism and intention to get tattoo again. It's completely APA format, so now I can close this and it saves my changes to the output file. I can save this SPSS output file, and then if I ever need to do any more editing, I can open this back up and edit it some more. It displays the relationship, which is, as we saw before, the relationship is negative and non-significant. And as you can see, there's really no linear trend there. So that's how to do the figure and get the results for a correlation between two continuous variables.